Have you ever felt that seeing too clearly is a kind of curse, that once the veil falls you can't go back to pretending? Carl Jung said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And yet, once you see the machinery of illusion, once you recognize the shadows moving beneath polite smiles, something inside you breaks, and it never fully heals. You begin to notice how most people move through life half asleep, chasing comfort instead of truth. You start hearing the small lies that keep the world spinning. I'm fine, as it's okay. That's just how things are. But the moment you see through them, you become a stranger among the sleeping. The conversations feel shallow, the laughter feels rehearsed, and silence becomes your only honest companion. Seeing too much doesn't make you superior, it makes you vulnerable, because awareness strips away your protection. You feel everything, the hidden pain in a friend's voice, the quiet despair behind ambition. The emptiness in celebration. Truth burns like light in the eyes of one who's been too long in the dark. And when you carry that light, people turn away, not because they hate you, but because they fear what you reflect. So you learn to walk gently, to hide your insight behind half smiles, to listen more than you speak, and sometimes you wish you could unsee what you've seen, to return to the comfort of blindness. But you can't. The wound of vision doesn't close. It becomes the place where light enters. If you've ever felt this way, if you've carried the weight of seeing too much, then this space is for you. You're not alone in your clarity, even if it isolates you. Tell me in the comments if you've ever felt that knowing the truth made life heavier. And if this message resonated, subscribe, like, and stay close, because what comes next goes even deeper. There is a mirror inside each of us, not made of glass, but of silence, a still surface that reflects what words cannot disguise. Most people avoid looking into it for too long. They sense that something in its depth is waiting to be revealed, something raw, unfiltered, and unedited. Jung called it the face of the unconscious, the truth we spend our lives trying not to meet. When you stand before this mirror, masks begin to dissolve. The roles you play, friend, lover, achiever, victim, start to feel like borrowed costumes. Beneath them, a faint shape emerges. Your real self, trembling, unprepared to be seen. It doesn't smile for approval or adjust to expectation. It simply is. And that simplicity is terrifying. You realize that much of your life has been spent escaping this reflection. You've built distractions, relationships, ambitions, all to avoid the rawness of your own being. Because the mirror doesn't lie. It shows you the things you pretend not to feel: jealousy, pride, emptiness, longing. It exposes how often you've betrayed yourself just to be accepted. But the mirror is not cruel. It doesn't judge. It simply waits for you to stop running. In that stillness, it whispers something that sounds like forgiveness. You begin to understand that truth isn't an enemy. It's a mirror asking to be embraced. And when you finally dare to look fully, you see not just your flaws but the quiet dignity in them. Every reflection becomes a dialogue with your soul. The more you accept, the less you need to hide. And slowly, the person you thought you were begins to merge with the one you've always been, beneath the noise. This is the start of integration, the courage to see without distortion, because when the mirror no longer lies, neither can you. There's a part of you that never speaks in daylight. It hides behind your kindness, your control, your achievements. Jung called it the shadow, the unclaimed self that holds everything you've rejected, every anger swallowed, every desire denied, every fear disguised as logic. It all gathers there, breathing quietly beneath your surface. Most people Think the shadow is evil. But it isn't. It's human. It's the collection of all that didn't fit the story you told about yourself. You were taught to smile, so you buried your rage. You were told to be strong, so you hid your pain. And now, that forgotten part of you moves through dreams, through mistakes, through sudden waves of emotion you can't explain. When you begin to see the shadow, it doesn't appear as a monster. It arrives as discomfort. It shows up in envy, in defensiveness, in the people you judge. It mirrors what you've exiled, and the harder you try to silence it, the louder it echoes in the corners of your life. The truth is, the shadow wants only one thing: acknowledgement. It doesn't demand perfection, it asks for honesty, because the moment you face it, something miraculous happens. The energy you spent repressing it becomes the force that transforms you. Rage becomes clarity, fear becomes intuition, darkness becomes depth. But meeting the shadow is not comfortable. It strips away the illusion of purity. It shows you how fragile your goodness is, how easily love turns to control, how close morality stands to hypocrisy. Yet, in that exposure, you begin to grow whole. So, sit with your darkness. Let it breathe beside you. Listen to what it's been trying to tell you for years, because only when you dare to face your shadow do you begin to meet your true light. One day, the mask begins to crack, not because you want it to, but because the weight of pretending becomes unbearable. The persona, as Jung called it, is the mask you wear to survive in the world. It's the image you've built, strong, kind, composed, successful. But behind that image, something fragile trembles, the truth of who you really are. At first, you fight to keep the mask intact. You smile when you want to scream. You agree when your soul whispers no. You become an actor in a play you never chose to join. But the more you try to hold the performance together, the more you feel a quiet, despair growing beneath your skin. Because every lie, even the beautiful ones, corrodes the soul that speaks it. Then comes the moment of collapse, maybe through heartbreak, burnout, loss, or simply exhaustion. The persona shatters, and for a terrifying instant you feel naked before existence. The identity you clung to dissolves. Who are you when no one is watching? When you're no longer being admired, needed, or understood? That collapse feels like death. But it's not the end. It's a beginning. The mask dies so that the face beneath it can breathe. And though that first breath feels painful, it's real. You no longer have to perform goodness. You can live truth. You no longer need to appear strong. You can be whole. The persona protected you once. But now authenticity becomes your only shelter. You start to rebuild, not from image, but from essence. Every honest word becomes a brick in the temple of your true self. And maybe that's what awakening really is. Not the discovery of something anew, but the slow, graceful dismantling of what was never real. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt your mask starting to crumble, even if you tried to hold it together? There comes a stage in awakening that feels less like revelation and more like exile. You see too much, feel too deeply, and suddenly the noise of the world no longer reaches you. The laughter sounds distant, conversations dissolve into echoes, and every crowd feels like a mirage. You've entered what I call the desert of
At this
lucidity,
point, consciousness
space between
expands
ignorance and
beyond the
understanding.
mind. You realize you were never truly alone, that there is something within you observing everything with serenity.
Where clarity burns hotter than
even
the sun.
in moments
It's
of
here
downfall.
that many turn back.
This
Because
silent
awareness can
presence,
feel like loneliness.
which once seemed
When illusions
distant,
fall away,
now
what's
becomes
left
your
is
center.
space.
And you
Vast,
understand
endless,
the journey has
uncomfortably
always
honest.
been a return.
The people you love might still be there,
not to a
but the
place,
connection
but
shifts.
to a state.
You can't unhear
A
the
state
falseness understand
of
their words,
loving
nor unsee the
lucidity,
fear behind
of
their smiles.
profound acceptance.
You start to notice how most
The
prefer
world
distraction
remains the
over
same,
depth,
but the way
comfort
you inhabit
over
it
truth.
changes.
And so you walk alone, not
the
out of
pain
pride,
of
but
others
necessity.
touches you, but it no
In
longer
this desert,
consumes
your
you.
former self dies slowly.
Doubts remain,
The need
but
for
you no
validation
longer
fades.
need
The hunger for
immediate
belonging
answers.
weakens.
Life
What
ceases
remains
to
is
be a
silence.
sequence of
And that
battles
silence
and
at
becomes
first
a
terrifies you,
dialogue between
because
the
in it,
visible
there's
and
no
the
applause, no
invisible,
audience, no story to
between
hide
the
behind.
human and the
Only
divine.
facing
The
yourself under
inner
the brutal
journey
light of
is
awareness.
silent,
But if you stay
it
long enough,
transforms
the silence
everything.
begins to change.
And
It
when
stops
you
being
finally
empty
cross
and
it,
becomes sacred.
you realize that
start to hear the
awakening
pulse
was never
of
about
something
understanding the world. It was about remembering who you
The
are
quiet
when the
rhythm beneath
world
existence
falls
itself.
silent.
You begin to realize
After
that solitude
traversing
isn't
the
punishment.
darkness and
It's
returning from the
initiation.
abyss,
Every enlightened
something
soul
within
has
you
crossed
will
this
never be
same
the
barren
same.
land.
There
So,
is no
don't rush to
fanfare,
escape your
no
desert.
glorious
Let it
revelation.
purify you.
There is
Let the
a
heat of
new,
truth burn away what's
mature,
false until what
almost
remains is
sacred
indestructible.
silence.
Because beyond this vast
Awakening
emptiness,
doesn't
a
make
new
you
kind of peace
superior.
awaits.
It
The
makes
peace
you
that only those
simpler.
who've truly seen
You
can
begin to see the
understand.
grandeur
To see
in
clearly is
small
not a
things,
privilege.
the
It's a
presence contained in
wait.
every gesture, the mystery hidden in the everyday.
Once your eyes adjust
The
to
mind
truth,
that once
you can no
sought
longer live as you did before.
explanations now
You notice
bows
what others
before
ignore,
the
the
inexplicable.
quiet manipulation in
And
kindness,
it is at
the
this
hidden fear
point
behind
that true
confidence, the
awakening
emptiness beneath
happens.
success.
When you
It's as
understand
if a layer
that
of illusion
seeing
has been
is
peeled
not
away,
dominating,
and now everything
but
glows with both beauty
understanding
and
with
despair.
humility.
Awareness
Jung
isolates,
said that
because
wholeness
to see
is not
means to
achieved
carry what others
through
refuse to
perfection,
acknowledge.
but
You
through
begin
the
to understand why many
integration
choose
of
denial.
opposites.
It's
This
lighter.
is what the
Ignorance
awakened
offers
one
comfort.
learns.
Illusion
Life
offers
is
belonging.
made of paradoxes, and all of them are true. Light and shadow,
But for those who have seen,
joy
there's no
and
way back.
pain,
You
love
carry the
and
burden of
fear,
lucidity,
all
walking
part
through
of the
a
same
world that
dance.
pretends not to
The
notice its own
ego
sleep.
wants to choose
Sometimes
a
you envy
side,
them,
but
the
the
dreamers,
soul
the
wants to
unbroken
embrace
believers.
the whole.
They laugh easily,
And when
love
you
recklessly,
finally
and
accept
rarely question
this,
the meaning of
the
their
weight
steps.
dissolves.
You
Not
hesitate.
because the
You
world
see the
has
fragility of
changed,
every joy,
but because you
the
have
impermanence
changed
of every
the way
certainty,
you are in
and
it.
yet somewhere in that awareness,
You begin to
something
realize
sacred
there's no
glows,
going back.
compassion.
After seeing,
Because you
you
realize
can
that
no
everyone is
longer
doing their
feign
best to survive the
blindness.
unbearable truth
After
of being.
awakening, you can no longer live asleep. But this is not
The burden of
punishment.
vision
It's
is not
a
meant
blessing.
to crush you.
Because
meant to mature
living
you,
awake is
to teach you
living
patience
real
with
and
the blind,
reality,
gentleness
even
with the
when it
fearful,
hurts,
and forgiveness
is
for yourself.
infinitely more
The
beautiful
more you see, the
than
less you judge.
illusion.
The more you understand,
Now,
the less you need to
silence
speak.
that once
Truth
frightened
doesn't
you
demand that you fix
becomes
the
a
world.
refuge.
It asks that you remain awake in it,
Loneliness
to bear
becomes
witness
company.
without losing tenderness,
Chaos
to walk through
transforms into
illusion
flow,
without becoming
and
cynical.
the gaze that once sought meaning outside now finds it within. You no longer need to understand everything, just
That is the true
feel
discipline
what
of
is
the
true.
awakened. To
And
see
if
everything
you've
and still
made it
choose
this
to love.
far,
There
it's
comes a moment
because
in every inner
something
journey
within you has
when the ego
awakened
can no
as
longer
well.
hold its ground. After all
Then
the battles to stay
subscribe
in
to the
control,
channel, because
after the
this
desperate
space
attempts
is
to
for
understand
those who
and fix
see
everything,
what the world
something
does
inside
not
finally
see.
breaks,
Comment.
not in defeat,
I woke
but
up
in
down
revelation.
here,
You
so I
realize that
know
the
you
one
made
trying to
this journey
awaken
with
is
me.
the same one
Leave a
standing in
like.
the way of awakening.
This helps spread that
The ego
awareness to
was never
others who
your
are waking up.
enemy.
And watch the next video. That is appearing on the screen, because the awakening has no end.
It was your armor,
It simply
your way of surviving the
continues
chaos of existence.
silently
It
within
built
you.
walls of certainty, identity, and pride to protect the fragile core of your being. But awakening demands exposure, and when the walls begin to crumble, the ego panics. It feels like death, because in a way it is. The death of illusion, of the need to be right, of the idea that you are separate from the vastness you belong to. At first, surrender feels like losing yourself. You resist. You cling to your opinions, your stories, your sense of control. You tell yourself you are the thinker, the doer, the one steering your life. But the deeper you go, the more you see. Thoughts happen, emotions rise and fade, life moves through you. You were never in command. You are always being carried. When the ego surrenders, the mind quiets, but not through effort. It's the silence that follows exhaustion, the calm that appears when there's nothing left to fight. In that stillness, awareness expands. You begin to witness, without judging, to act without performing. The world doesn't change, but your relation to it does. Every moment becomes less about control and more about participation, less about certainty and more about presence. Surrender is not submission, it's alignment. It's the realization that truth doesn't need to be managed. It unfolds on its own when you stop interfering, and in that surrender, you discover something paradoxical. What you feared losing was never truly you. Tell me in the comments, what does letting go mean to you? Is it weakness? Or is it a kind of strength the mind can't understand? After the collapse, there is quiet, not peace, at least not yet, but a strange stillness that feels almost sacred. The storm of awakening has passed, and what remains is the debris of who you used to be. The persona is gone, the ego humbled, and the illusions that once defined you lie scattered across the floor of your consciousness. It is here, in this sacred ruin, that reconstruction begins. But rebuilding the self after awakening is not about returning to what was. It's about learning how to live without the masks that once protected you. At first, it feels disorienting. You no longer know what to believe, what to want, or even who you are. Every habit, every relationship, every dream must be re-examined, not to judge them, but to see if they were ever truly yours. You begin to rebuild from honesty, from simplicity, from silence. What remains is not the identity you perform, but the essence that observes. You find yourself speaking less, listening more, choosing carefully where your energy flows. Life slows down, but its meaning deepens. You no longer crave to be seen, you crave to see. You no longer chase belonging, you begin to belong to yourself. Jung called this process individuation, the slow merging of the conscious and the unconscious into wholeness. It's not about perfection, it's about integration. You start to reclaim the pieces you once exiled. Your anger becomes courage, your sadness becomes compassion. Your fear becomes wisdom. Every fragment of who you are finds its rightful place, and so the self is reconstructed, not as a mask, but as a living truth. You no longer build from fear or image, but from authenticity. The structure that rises from the ashes is lighter, more transparent, more alive. You no longer seek to become someone. You allow yourself to be. There comes a moment when truth stops burning and begins to illuminate. After all the battles, the losses, the shedding of illusions, awareness settles into something gentler. The pain of seeing too much gives way to a quiet acceptance, a peace that doesn't depend on understanding, but on surrender. You no longer need life to make sense. You simply let it unfold. This peace is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of clarity. You still feel sadness, disappointment, even anger, but they no longer consume you. They move through you like weather across the sky. You observe their shapes, their colors, their impermanence. The difference now is that you no longer mistake them for yourself. You are the sky, not the storm. You begin to sense that everything has its place, the beauty and the chaos, the joy and the suffering. You realize that darkness was never the enemy of light, but its teacher. That pain was not punishment, but purification. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start whispering, "Thank you," because every loss carves space for something more authentic to appear. In this peace, judgment fades. You no longer need to prove, defend, or correct. You see others with softer eyes, recognizing the same confusion, the same longing, the same divinity hidden beneath fear. Compassion arises naturally, not as a moral choice but as a state of being. You understand that we are all fragments of the same awakening, each at our own pace, and in that realization, solitude no longer feels like isolation. It becomes communion. You find peace not in retreating from the world, but in walking through it without resistance. The awakened don't escape life. They finally meet it, fully, tenderly, and without
At this
armor.
point,
This is the peace of
consciousness
those who
expands
see,
beyond
the serenity
mind.
of knowing that everything
You realize
belongs.
you are never
Awakening is not
truly
a final
alone,
moment.
that there
It's
is
a lifelong
something
choice.
within you
The hardest part
observing
isn't seeing the
everything
truth,
with
it's staying open to
serenity,
it. Because
even
once you
in
awaken,
moments of
the world
downfall.
keeps trying to
This
lull you back to
silent
sleep,
presence,
with
which
comfort,
once
with
seemed
distraction,
distant,
with the
now
soft
becomes
hypnosis of
your
routine.
center.
The real
And you
courage
understand the
begins
journey
when you
has
decide
always
again and
been
again not
a
to close your
return,
eyes.
not to a place, but to a state. A
Remaining
state
awake
of
means carrying
loving
light through ordinary
lucidity,
days.
of
It means holding
profound
on to awareness
acceptance.
when life becomes
The
loud
world
and uncertain.
remains the
You no
same,
longer have the
but the way
privilege of
you
pretending.
inhabit it
You feel everything,
changes.
the
The
beauty
pain
and
of
the horror,
others
the love and the
touches
decay,
you, but
and yet you
it no
continue to
longer
stand in the center
consumes
of it
you.
all,
Doubts
unblinking.
remain,
That is the
but you
quiet
no
bravery
longer
of
need
consciousness,
immediate
to see
answers.
clearly
Life
and still
ceases to be a
choose
sequence
compassion.
of
Those
battles
who
and
stay awake
becomes a
often
dialogue
feel
between the visible and
misunderstood.
the invisible, between the human and the divine. The
You
inner
speak
journey
differently, you
is
value
silent,
silence.
but it
You search for
transforms
depth where others chase
everything.
distraction.
And
But that
when you
distance
finally
isn't
cross
punishment,
it,
it's
you
protection.
realize that
The awakened are not
awakening
meant to
was
belong to the
never
crowd.
about
They are meant
understanding
to
the
remind the
world,
crowd that
it was
something
about
deeper exists.
remembering who
And so
you
walk
are when
slowly,
the world
deliberately,
falls
through a world
silent.
still dreaming.
After
You plant
traversing the
seeds with your
darkness
words,
and
your
returning
presence,
from the
your
abyss,
gentleness.
something
You stop
within you
arguing with
will never
illusions
be the
and begin
same.
embodying truth.
There is
The
no
point
fanfare,
was never
no
to
glorious
escape the world, it was to
revelation.
see
There
it, love
is
it.
a new, mature, almost sacred silence.
And
Awakening
move through it
doesn't
with
make
eyes
you
unclouded.
superior.
To remain
It
awake is to
makes
keep
you
your heart
simpler.
open even when it hurts,
You begin to
to
see the
keep seeking
grandeur
meaning
in small
even when the
things,
night
the
feels endless.
presence
Because
contained
awakening
in
isn't
every
about perfection,
gesture,
it's
the
about
mystery
persistence.
hidden in the
The courage to
everyday.
remain conscious
The
when
mind
forgetting
that
would be
once
easier.
sought
If you've reached this
explanations
far,
now
you are part
bows
of the few
before
who
the
choose awareness over
inexplicable.
comfort.
And
Tell
it
me in
is
the
at
comments
this
what
point
awakening has
that
meant to
true
you.
awakening
If this
happens, when you
message
understand
resonated,
that seeing is not dominating, but understanding with humility. Jung said that wholeness is not
subscribe, like, and stay awake. Our next journey goes even deeper into the mystery you already carry within.